Hi, everyone, and welcome to another installation of Love Talks. Love Talks is something I do monthly. It's monthly conversations with industry experts with the sole goal of expanding, awakening, and broadening your breadth of knowledge to support you in your love life. And we've got a juicy topic for this month of July. We're going to be asking the question, what does God have to do with it? And so I know already that has elicited numerous responses and curiosity. And that's what I encourage you to do tonight while listening to my guest and I having our conversation, is to be curious. Come in with a curious mind. We might be using some language that people aren't used to or might be slightly triggering. So I just invite you to keep an open mind to the conversation and then also engage as well. So we really encourage you to ask questions, to deepen the conversation within yourself and within the one that I'll be having with my guest tonight. So my guest tonight, welcome, is Chris Dube. I'll read a little bio on him. Chris also, I will let everyone know ahead of time, is a dear friend and I consider also a spiritual mentor. I've gone to him about numerous things that I need clarity about because the breadth of his knowledge runs deep. So Chris is an earth mystic and yogi whose practice is focused on mirroring breath, movement, and meditation to cultivate an awareness of self as universal creator. He is an author, editor, and workshop facilitator for spiritually focused topics. He also enjoys music, creative art, and all things orthodynamic, which we might need an explanation as to exactly what that means. But welcome. Thank you so much for being here and having this conversation with me today.
Thanks, Andrea. I really appreciate being here.
It's great to have you here. So
Awesome.
as I do with all my guests, I'd love to invite you to maybe expand on how you came here today, why this particular topic speaks to you so deeply, and as well, what orthodynamics is.
Well, let's start right there. I think everyone needs some kind of a hobby or something that they just do for the love of it. No strings attached, no expectations, just joy. And for me, orthodynamic headphones. They are essentially headphones that are created by using flat magnets and building a diaphragm in between the magnets and creating sound. It's an old technology, probably from the 70s, but it's sort of making a resurgence, and there's a huge online community that I'm sort of part of and explored. I have some here in my place. I just love the sound of what they make, of music, and that's what orthodynamic is. So it's nothing sinister. That's awesome.
Now let's speak to sort of your journey to where you are now and why this topic in particular, because when I invited you to come on to Love Talks, I said, what would you like to talk about? Because I really want to be speaking to people where it's something that ignites within them. They really feel that they have something to share. And you came up with this beautiful topic. So speak to that a little bit.
All right. Well, for me, it was a huge discovery. So it's the pivotal realization that I came to on my path, and it's basically has colored everything that I've done since. And it was simply the realization that God wanted to experience life as me. So that totally shifted things for me. So it was almost like an introduction, God knocking on my door, the door of my life, figuratively speaking, and asking for entrance as a guest. Like, hey, can I see what you go through? What's your life like? And for me, it sort of began slowly, and then it just kind of spread out with the understanding that nothing is excluded, that God can accompany me in every single thing that I do. So there are no borders or boundaries or something that's excluded from that equation. So that includes relationships. and sexual expression within the relationship. So how do you fit God into that? So there's a bit of a like, oh, really, can we
I
do
can hear
that?
some people's eyebrows raising right now.
And so that's it. So it's been sort of an exploration of feeling myself into the ease of it, like resting with that awareness, and cultivating it and being consciously aware of that practice. And it has impacted my life, and also shifted the relationship that I'm in with my partner, Jill. And so we've kind of grown as we continue to explore that. So I thought this is a huge topic, but also
Yeah.
very, very accessible for people that, others can kind of get into.
So you
So
said
that's,
something. I'd love to get a little clarity around it because how does one know when God knocks on your door?
I, you see, I don't know. So it will happen differently for everybody. But
Okay.
I think you can start with just an understanding that it's already the case. So there's no place for anything to exist except within the creator, if I may use that word, which I think is more accessible for all of us.
Mhm.
So everything that is basically exists within that dynamic. So it's like the contain of everything. And some people use the word love, and I think that's very, very appropriate. And the Bible uses the phrase God is love, but you can take that farther. But it's just an awareness that, hey, this is already happening. I can consciously participate in it. So there's one line that I've came across from a poet called Kabir, and one of the things, poems he writes is he asks the question, how can God um, be a guest in a house in which the host is not present?
Ah,
So a lot of our lives are sort of like that. I mean, God is with us all the time, but imagine a guest coming into your house and the host is just AWOL, not there. Don't even recognize them. I mean, what fun is that? That's not fun. But once you engage with the host and the guest, a lot can happen. You begin to do things together. Maybe the guests can cook a fantastic pasta lasagna. I don't know, but stuff like that can begin to happen. So that is really the point of where you can light the spark is just to be aware that it's already happening, but you can begin to consciously participate in it, and then things begin to happen. Sparks take place. You know.
so would it be fair to say that it begins with an awareness or even before that, a sense of curiosity that
Mm-hmm.
that can be the invitation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think the curiosity is important. The beginning of the exploration. So once you've kind of connected with that process, or even just the sense of the adventure behind it, you can begin to do experiments. You can really begin to, okay, fine, I'm going to experiment with this, see, is it really real, test it out. I mean, get the sense of, maybe at work, for example, I don't know, depending on where people work, just get the sense that, hey, God is experiencing my life right now. What's going on around me? Just begin to sense the shifts that happen, maybe the approaches that people begin to take to you, because they begin to sense, if they also have a sort of a clean awareness, they can begin to sense the shift that's happened in you. It happens very, very easily with animals, birds, bees, dogs. The moment you make that shift, they kind of see that you've brought in an awareness of the presence of the creator, and they begin to relate to that aspect. It's very surprising what happens, and I've had so many incidences of this where I can tell right away the approach is not to Chris. They're not coming to see Chris. They're just coming to say hi to this open aperture to the source of love, which is
So
God
what
that you have allowed into your life.
So share an example. What would be what would be a story that, or an incident or an experience that is representative of that happening?
Well, let me share a story that happened last week. We were going to this. You were there, but not before then. So we were going to the dispatcher ceremony. But before we got there, Jill and I stopped at a park and we got something to eat, and we just, just kind of rested, enjoyed the weather and the environment. And a lady was walking two dogs, I think large brown Labradors or something like that. Basically, mature dogs because they were a little bit older, wanted a limp and so forth. So they were kind of circling and around, and they were kind of eyeing us. And so the dogs stopped. And so the lady was asking, "Okay, guys, what are you doing?" And I could see it, right? And I said, "Hey, they just want to say hi." So she allowed them to come. So they came over and we just started, just exchanging hellos and just saying hi to them. I was just, loving them and just opening laugh to them because I knew what the recognition was. It wasn't like, hey, this is a nice guy. No, but I was opening my heart to them and to creation and specifically to those two dogs. So they came and they were just, so cool. I mean, they were fantastic. So one of the older dogs started rolling. So he was sort of in front of me and started rolling around. And then the lady said, "Wow, he really likes you. He never does that. He likes you." And so she was babysitting the other dog, and they're kind of a similar dog. So the other dog did that, and the other dog, who has never done that before, did exactly the same thing. So came in front and started, and she said she was just, I could tell she was kind of blown away by that. She said, "Wow, you're doing it too," So like their own expression of just joy and openness, and I just allow space for that to happen. So and Jill was commenting, "Oh, yeah, dogs love Chris, but that's not really appropriate. Dogs love God." you know. And I'm not saying so. Maybe let me just pause there because there's a huge trigger that happens to a lot of people when they hear an identification of somebody with God. I'm not saying that I am God, so it's not the same thing. I am saying that God is allowing, or God is expressing life as me. So there's a nuanced difference there. So this is not a heretical or mystical thing, and in some cases it's appropriate to say that, but that's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that I've allowed myself to be a receiving stage for the presence of the Creator. That is all. I'm still Chris. I'm still a human being. I'm still flawed. I'm not by any means a spiritually exceptional person. I'm just an ordinary human being, and I live a very ordinary life. But I have allowed my life to become an aperture for God's presence in my life. That's all, as an
Everyone can
accompaniment.
do that, Chris. So the
Everyone. Yeah,
invitation is open to everyone. So
correct.
while you're sharing your story, a couple of things came up for me. So even, I think it's so beautiful and we are challenged a lot of the time as human beings because we integrate information and we have a memory that goes far beyond what animals do, with maybe the exception of an elephant, and hold on to stuff and start creating belief systems and stories that help
Right.
support our perhaps narrow view of life in love and relationship, or life in general.
Correct.
So it takes a lot and a practice to be in a state of openness, and to have that kind of exchange with another human being doesn't feel as safe as it does with an animal.
Right.
But still, I understand that God or the Creator or Spirit lives through all of us. How are we making that? It seems more in flow when we're in that space of openness,
Correct.
and peaceful when we're doing it, say, with an animal, as long as there's not a fear there. But when we're feeling disconnected or we haven't accepted the invitation, when we're in our dark place or we're feeling very closed, is that presence still residing within us? And how can people think about making the shift to
Right.
move through all the things that limit us from that connection?
Right, correct. That's a powerful question, and I think we are all faced with that at one point or another. But what's actually fundamentally true and always true is that we are always connected to the Creator. We are never. There is no point in which we're ever disconnected from our source. So that's what's always true. So sometimes things happen in our lives that make us forget that, or challenges that come to face up to us and basically cloud that awareness and that understanding. I mean, at that moment, I think the shift is only the connection to say, I am safe. I am always within the Creator. There is nothing that exists that is apart or outside of the presence of God. That is what's true. Even if the stuff that's actually in front of you looks contradictory to the understanding of who and what God is, that assurance, that just that one understanding of realizing that everything that is held within the presence of God, even that which I'm not understanding right now, or even this which is seems contrary to that understanding. So you ground yourself in that awareness. But of course, that takes, even then, it also takes sort of a prior belief, you know,
Well, that's faith,
in
more or less.
God. Yeah.
Yeah, what you're describing is faith, having faith in something that you can't see or touch. And
Hmm.
that can be a tough thing for people to do, especially when they're not feeling in resonance with it.
Right. Yeah.
So how do we make
I'm
the
sorry.
distinction of, living in that place of joy when we're in resonance with it being more easy to accept? I've heard so much, and everyone bear with me, I'm getting clarity around all these things, because as we lead into the conversation of it in relationship and
Hmm.
recognizing this in our partner and in those that we are wanting to deeply connect with, I think
Hmm.
we need to get clear about how we do that with ourselves first.
That's where we start. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have to begin there. We really
So
have. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, so when we're in that joy and feeling that resonance, it's easier to substantiate that belief or have a foundation for that faith.
Hmm.
But when I think the majority of us, more often than not, in our human experience, are feeling very challenged, especially in relationship.
Yeah.
We oftentimes are looking outside of ourselves. So even if we already have a relationship with the Creator or God or some semblance of a faith-based
Hmm.
belief,
Hmm.
when things go wrong,
We
we
look
tend to
out.
want to blame that. Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
We look
Right. So
outside.
I have learned through my own lessons that self-accountability is actually a very powerful thing, as uncomfortable as it can be at times.
Right.
How, with that thought in mind, what would you offer to people that are in that place, finding it difficult to find that connection within themselves first?
Okay.
So
I
you
would
talked
be.
about feeling safe. Sorry, you talked
Yeah.
about feeling safe,
Yeah.
but when you're feeling unsafe, that's a
Yeah.
really big leap.
Of course it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so let's take an instance in which you are actually feeling unsafe. So,
Mhm.
how do you unhinge from that in order to begin to feel that you are safe? Well, I would say that even in that unsafety, you are ultimately safe, even without your awareness of that safety. So, just you continuing to do the very best you can in whatever situation you're dealing with whatever tools you feel you have at your disposal, you are already in the process of unhinging yourself. But there has to be an authenticity in you engaging with whatever it is that you are in front of. So you don't have to call on God, you don't have to call on the saints or anyone else, but be authentically present to the situation that you're dealing with and use whatever tools you have. And they may be even just plain human tools of saying, you know what, I can't cope with this, I'm going to walk out the door, or whatever it is, but be engaged with your life. So I think, you talked about taking self responsibility. That's probably a touchstone of where we can only live our lives. So we can bring some of the things that help us later, but really we have to engage with our own lives through a sense of self responsibility for living our lives. No one else can live it. Not even God can live your life for you. So that's actually a sort of a misnomer to think that God's presence somehow negates the necessity for you to live your life. No, you actually have to continue to live your life. So what I would say to anyone caught in that situation is be your truest self within the situation. There is no right or wrong if you are really doing that. So even if you're making mistakes in the process of doing that, but there is actually walking, you're actually taking steps to walk. And that's how you're guided. So one of the things that I've come to realize is that God or the angels or the universe or anything else that, no matter how we name it, only guides us through the process of doing. Only when you begin to move does the help come in. So if you're just standing still and then in a frozen place, even the help that's waiting in the wings can't do anything. So, but once you begin to take steps to whatever small actions you begin to take, then the help begin to move in and guide you. So I would say just be as humanly authentic as you can be in whatever terrible or tough situation that you're in, and just continue to do your life, be yourself, but be aware as well that in your genuine, authentic movement to better yourself, there's always help available. And it's even more so when you begin to call on it. That's when the process of engagement and actual active participation in your own evolution begins to take place, once
So
you've
what is
actually opened that
engaging
up.
it? Yeah, what is engaging? There's so much goodness in what you just said. So let's distill a bit of it. First and foremost, what just popped up is how are you then engaging it? So you say help and assistance is there. How does one engage in doing that?
Oh, just call on it. That's right. I think that's really the basic.
How
Just do.
simple.
Well, kids get it.
Yeah.
They just call on it. I mean, they need help, even if their parents are not there or no one that they recognize. They just call on it. It's just instinctual within them to say, "I can call for help." So, and that's a practice that we can do. We lose that because we think once we grow up, we are detached from everything that around us. We're detached from helpers. We can make it alone, and we were go it alone kind of guys, people, gals. But really, there's no place that we are that we don't have help. So every person that's alive right now is a vast source of help or guides that are there because they're so interested in the uniqueness of your life. So they are drawn to you because of the uniqueness of your human situation, and they want to help you. So think of it as like we've got a vast audience. We're like the arena of this is where it's happening. We can't see all that's around us, but really, Earth is where it's at. So every human life that's actually engaging with this environment is like a nova superstar in the universe. So but when we kind of get that sense, and actually totally love the trajectory of our lives and what it shows up. So the uniqueness of who we are, and just know that we are loved just because of that, we can really begin to do us, in a joyful, juicy manner, without trying to copy anybody else, and right, just really sink into the well of our riches and just draw them out and just let the juiciness come out of what it means to be human right now as James or Paul or Audrey or anybody else, So that is where you, you really begin to get a deep sense of self love, and you need that. You need that, and that's where the calling comes in. You know.
Yeah, I love that. So I just want to acknowledge some people. So Ronald has asked, are we supposed to ask questions? Ronald, just so we can get into the flow of the conversation, and we're going to lead into relationship as to why
Mm-hmm.
Chris and I are having this talk tonight. We're kind of giving the foundation for within ourselves, and then we'll lead into relationships. So write those questions down. I will pause and invite you to ask questions a little bit later. Ginny says, even in those places where we are not moving, is God not still present with us in the being?
Well,
The answer is
true.
yes.
The answer is yes. God is still present there. So I think even then you are held. Sometimes it is true. We can get frozen in place. But I think the warmth of God's love, which is always there, eventually, will begin to melt, whatever whatever has been holding us in place in our lives so that we're not able to move. So, I mean, there is that assurance that the presence of God's love is always there, even when you're not aware of it, even when you feel like frozen in place and nothing is moving or shifting in your life, you really still are held in that. And even those periods, they can actually be like rich material. They can be um, a process of germination that's taking place. So don't discount them. I don't think we should put a sort of a hard and fast rule between, that sort of pause or nothing is happening moment and the activity that happens in our lives is better. It's not necessarily better. There's no they're not mutually exclusive. So the pause can still be a rich resource for you when you do begin to move. It will bring maybe a sense of clarity. So I think I would go back to in your pause. Are you still genuine? Does that feel like you still need that, or you're feeling like it's time to move? So there has to still be a sense of genuineness even in the pause. It has to feel right. It has to feel like you need it. It has to feel like this is your moment. Your life is calling for it. That is the season of your life. If that is the case, hey, love it. Or just sink into it and just totally soak it in. So don't discount it. I mean, love it until it's time for you to feel like I've had enough of this. I feel full. It's time to shift. You
Yeah.
know.
And that's when surrender comes in, is it not, Chris? That's
Yes.
when the letting go, and when we dig our heels in and try and control
Mm-hmm.
things that are happening around us, and this certainly plays into relationship,
Mm-hmm.
that we get ourselves into trouble. So anything for myself where I have found it deepens my faith in that connection and love is that everything's happening for a reason. And if I can let go and surrender, which is harder sometimes than others,
It
there's
can be.
all sometimes, most often, the biggest gifts are in our discomfort.
That's correct.
Uh, because pausing is typically uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
because we're expecting, especially if it's in an area of discomfort. But when we feel like something should be happening and it's not, there's typically a juicy nugget of something we're supposed to be getting out of it. But
Right.
surrender is a big part. Do you want to speak about surrender just briefly before we dive into relationship?
Yeah, definitely. It was an echo there. Beautiful. I think the word surrender kind of suggests that it's a passive process. I just want to knock that out the window. The process of surrender is an activity, it's an action. So you're actually engaged with it. You don't just it's not something that you just flop and just let. You're actually it almost takes as much energy for you to be in a process of surrender as it is to be in action. So the surrender is actually very alert. You are alert within the process of surrender. You are aware of what you're doing. It's almost like um, you are receiving something even in the process of surrender. So the surrender is actually an allowing and a trusting, and the trust, I think, is a huge component of surrender, because it's an understanding that there is something out there that is greater than you are and more vastly intelligent and aware of your circumstances and the intricate details of your life than maybe you can actually see because you're so close to it.
Yeah, and there's a
You know,
reason. There's a reason why you're going through what you're going through at that moment. It may not
yeah,
be
but
clear at times.
sorry, I kind of knocked my camera, but sometimes you can't see it.
No.
So, because you are so close to it that you can't even decipher it. But when you hit up against that wall and you begin to actually get into the process of active surrender, maybe we'll join those two words just as a reminder, of what it is really. Then you begin to I sort of lost my train of thought there. Remind
Active
me.
surrender.
Yeah.
Active surrender. Yes.
Okay. But there's a point I was relating to. Um, anyway, we'll let that go. I'm not sure. Maybe it'll come back. But I've lost my train of thought there in terms of where I was going with it.
That's
We'll
okay.
leave it there. That's fine.
Perfect. Perfect. So, the conversation that we started, or the question that started everything tonight, is what's God got to do with it? So we've done the connection with our relationship with God and with
Hmm.
love within ourselves. How do we start taking the embodiment of that, or the nurturing of that within us, that relationship, that understanding, that connection, and start lending it, um, allowing it to support us in our connection with another, especially in a romantic relationship?
All
How
right.
does that begin? How can we start viewing through that lens?
Hmm. Well, I think we've kind of zeroed in on the necessity of viewing it through the lens of self. So, first of all, cultivating that awareness within yourself. And you don't really need to be in a romantic relationship in order to do that. So, you can be in a relationship with the creator, or rather, the creator is an active participant or even an observer of your life. So having that awareness and that practice and just kind of playing with that. And you can do that. You can do that for the rest of your life without ever being in a relationship with another. But when you are in a relationship, or if that's something that comes across a phase of your life, then it's like adding one and one and getting three. That is really maybe the easiest equation that I can express about what actually happens when you begin to bring that awareness into an intimate relationship or a relationship with a partner. Then the process now becomes one of looking at the other person as the creator. So you extend that awareness to the other now. So like right now, I'm looking at an aspect of God looking back at me, and that is you, Andrea. So we're having this dance within God, within the creator, and an aspect of the creator is conversing with another one, and we're creating this dynamic. So that's my view of you now. So I look within you and I see that God is expressing through you in order to allow this converse to take place. So let's take it there. So this is actually us. So we are like portions of the creator, kind of, yeah, not so much divided, but rising up in order to allow this conversation to take place. So this is happening all around us, you know. So is this the expression of the divine arising in order to allow these beautiful expressions of creativity to take place? This is what we call creation. So everything around us is like this dance of the creator bubbling up to the surface in order to allow these intricate things to take place. So that's the practice when you begin to relate to another. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you will always have clarity about that awareness all the time. But let me just give you an example of something that I use every time I go to the dentist. And I'm going tomorrow. I just happen to have an appointment tomorrow. Um, I sit there and I realize this is fantastic. You know, this is an aspect of God helping another aspect of God. So I allow the hands of the dentist to offer that service to the creator. Not so much to Chris, but to offer that service to another aspect of the creator to allow the healing to take place. So I now see my dentist as an arm, an expression of God, helping another aspect of God that needs help. So, and every time I sit there, it just blows me away. And I'm lying there and I just allow that. It's just beautiful stuff happens and we're just joking. And you can just tell I love it. And I don't tell people what I'm doing. I don't tell him, but I just let that flow happen. I just express gratitude. So same thing within the context of an intimate relationship. So a beautiful meal has been cooked and maybe Jill and I are eating and it's like because both of us are doing this, so we sit there and we share that meal with the creator. It's like an expression, a celebration of humanity and human life, and we want to share this beautiful expression of human creativity and joy, the things that give us joy as human beings, and we share that with God. So we are doing that consciously because both of us are doing that. Now, if the other partner is doing the same thing, and they're looking at you as God, now how did it feel when I was expressing myself to you? I'm looking at you as the creator within the context of this conversation. I'm
I
just
think a feeling of being seen, um, honored, appreciated. So I can see through making that connection and viewing that in another individual that it creates that opening. Because if you going to the dentist, which for a lot of people is not an enjoyable experience, and can go in with gratitude and see the strength or beauty or love in another individual that's doing something to you, it's
right.
almost like focusing on the beauty of it as opposed to the negative. So
Mm-hmm.
from, love and relationship coach sort of viewpoint, doing that with your partner can see the good and encourage and honor the good and the beautiful aspects of the other person, and not get caught up in necessarily the human frailties or flaws that can
Mm-hmm.
trip
Mm-hmm.
us up a lot in relationship. That's how
Right.
it's feeling for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Awesome. And you touched on a very good point because the human frailties will remain. They're always there. But when you are dealing with somebody else within the context of that awareness and you're holding them within that, you begin to have an understanding of the struggles that another may be having in
Mm-hmm.
coming to a space in which they sense their wholeness. And you give space for that. So sometimes it doesn't necessarily take words for you to be able to do that, but just sending that awareness, just extend your arms around whatever it is they're feeling and dealing with, so that you can kind of buttress or rather support them in the process of unresolving the situation that they're dealing with, whether it is just human frailty. And it happens with, I'll give an example to our own relationship. Even so, Jill and myself are both consciously engaged in our relationship from that awareness. So we both have that cultivation of allowing or expressing the Creator within our own lives. But sometimes things happen. I mean, just we're just human beings, so we give each other that leeway to come back to your recognition. So the practice is to always return. You don't get it like once and you got it. Oh, it's all done. No, the practice is to constantly return to it. You constantly return to it. You remind yourself again what it is you're doing. You remind yourself again, oh, I'm allowing my life to be an expression of God's presence in the world. That's what I'm doing in this relationship. I'm allowing this relationship to be an expression of God's presence in relationship with another. So you come back to that, and as we do, we just recognize ourselves and say, oh yeah, we kind of take a detour there, that's not very helpful, and we come back, and so the practice is to constantly return, constantly return, constantly return,
So
and
it's like
as you do that,
returning to love. Yeah. What I'm hearing
yeah,
is a return to love. The
a
other
return
stuff
to
can come
love.
up and it doesn't need to mean the end of anything. Returning to love within ourselves and then returning to love within relationship as well. And I can
Right.
see how easily that can be a beautiful invitation between the two of you and within yourself to deepen the relationship and look through a lens of compassion, which is what love invites you to do.
Correct. Yeah.
Um, I love that. I love that. So, Chris, I just want to pause for a moment because we've given people lots of things to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some that were interested in asking some questions. And we're at about 20 minutes left in our conversation tonight. So, if you had some questions for Chris that you would like him to address, please go ahead and post those now. And I'm happy to share them. In the meantime, as we wait for those to arise, there's lots of appreciation here. Beautiful thanks, Chris, from Ginny, and joyful, juicy information from Camellia. So thank you for those comments.
Awesome.
As we wait to see if any questions arise, you talked about really a continuation or a deepening of this relationship through the divine. Can you speak to that a bit more and how that expands? And I'm assuming that, of course, it always originates within us.
Correct.
That everything always originates within us.
Mm-hmm. Well, the deepening, I think, happens through practice. So it's kind of it sounds as if it's something that's mechanical, but it's not. And the practice, I think, is having some way in which you have a spiritual practice that nourishes your sense of connection to the divine. Now, there is no boundary or border as to how you can do that. Just as you are aware that you are nourishing this sense of connection, you have to kind of begin to feel it, that this is what you are doing. You just create a practice for yourself that allows you to do that.
Wonderful.
A practice may be going to a senior's home and making tea and sharing your tea with somebody, but doing it with awareness that you're giving of yourself as an expression of love to another who is in a place in which love is a huge resource. So that can be your practice. The practice can be nurturing the life of a pet and giving your love and receiving love from that pet in sort of unconditional terms. That can be your practice. So I think the onus is on us to find something that really resonates, that rings our bell. What is that? What is that one thing that is like a portal to your soul, to the nature of your soul? So
It all,
find that. Go
It
ahead.
also sounds like through a bit of service as well, Chris. is what I'm hearing. And I know when we can give, we can better receive as well. Ronald has popped up with a question. Is the effectiveness of prayer dependent on feeling of reverence and sincerity?
Is the effectiveness of prayer dependent on on the feeling of reverence and sincerity? It's a bit of a far afield question. I know, Ronald. Thanks for showing up, Ronald. That's awesome. He's from our conscious creation meditation men's group.
Wonderful.
Um, and, I would definitely say no. you know, the feeling of reverence and sincerity can easily be misconstrued. So if you go in with the understanding that, oh, this is how I'm feeling reverence and sincerity for the Creator, and without actually the authenticity of your prayer or your call to the divine, then you actually worship on somebody who is just drunk on the street and swears and say, God, I'm tired of this fucking shit. I need your help. Somebody like that may have actually tapped in to the truest sense of reverence and sincerity than somebody who comes in pious and trying to almost bribe God with their sincerity and reverence. So definitely not. So it's not dependent on that. I think it's dependent on truthfulness of your inner being. How
Mm.
truthful are you being in this expression of your prayer? And you don't need to be praying in any formal way in order to be praying. You can be praying out there just simply because life is just facing you with stuff, and you just like, you know, exploding out because you need help. So, no, I would definitely say that's not the case. But that question is a little farther afield from where we are.
Yeah, that's
Um,
okay. We're going to let
yeah,
him have one more question here. He says, is it
awesome.
better to get in connection with one's higher self before getting into a romantic relationship? And that's more on point with what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
and absolutely. And I think that's what we've kind of talked about. And I think you can actually, the conversation that we've had about connecting with God is essentially the same thing, connecting with your higher self. So your greater self is like this awareness of your greater being that is an overview of your life, can see the intricate parts of your life and exactly where things connect. So connecting with that is a huge resource in order for you to be able to heal your own self or get an understanding of who you are as a spiritual being. And then, of course, when you bring that into relationship with another, you're bringing a huge resource and a help that will actually help guide the navigation process of that relationship, because you're almost like making it's like joining two maps that can be very complex, intricate algorithm that have to be worked out in order to make that happen. So when you have that trust factor of being tapped into your greater self, you're in a much better place than somebody who just has their own kind of little map that they've drawn up or whatever and trying to kind of make things hash and work with another. So definitely, yes, it's
Yeah,
definitely
or
the
a map
case.
that's just sort of not even committed, like it's sort of hazy and not, it's a watercolor map instead of one that
Yeah.
has strong understanding of the parameters of who they
Mm.
are and the
Yeah.
boundary and foundation of who makes them for sure.
Yeah. And
I want to acknowledge Ginny here because she's saying what I hear in the practice is commitment, an unswerving commitment, which is rooted in love. I love that.
yeah, and that's well said. Um, I think maybe one of the things that I want to sort of point to what Jenny just highlighted is this rootedness in love. But this love is actually a personal relationship to an aware consciousness. So it's not a passive, or it's not a relationship with something that is a mechanical process. So think of this love as a divine being with its own consciousness and awareness and aliveness. So it's not a thing that we take and use. It's someone that we're in relationship to. I think that's why I kind of revert back to this word of God and creator. I know the word God can trip some people, but the word God is a reminder to this understanding that comes through to us, that God is love. So if you remove the understanding of love as a thing, or love as sort of a or even a dynamic, it's not so much that, but bring it to with the understanding that you can be in relationship with love before you even have it with another. So cultivate it as honor that person. It's like there's almost like a respect that you have to have for another person in order to be in a good relationship with them. So, and I think there is something to it when we bring that active participation in a relationship already. And that relationship, I think we've pointed to, is the relationship with the Creator. So, and it's the source of all being, the source of all personality, the source of all that is. So there's a richness there that is actually infinite. So if you allow yourself to tap into that as your activity of knowing what love is, I think you will have something actually richer and deeper to bring into a relationship. And also knowing that what you have is not dependent on the relationship, it transcends that relationship. So even when the relationship comes to an end, you don't lose that. You're actually, in some sense, enriched by that because of what you have brought to it. So you're bringing to it a vaster container rather than a thing. So you're bringing to it your dynamic relationship with the source of the creation. So when the relationship comes to an end, no matter which way it comes to an end, it maybe through death, or maybe just through the sense that you've outgrown each other in your path. You still have that richness, that you brought into the relationship, and you've enriched it because of the experience you've had, and more importantly, you've allowed, the Creator or Source to experience that. It's your gift to God. Even in failed relationships, it's like you've walked that path of human experience and you've shared that with God, even with the failure or the breaking up of relationships. So it's not something you curse; it's actually something you bless because of what you go through. So that's a good question there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jenny says, yes, it's a living commitment with one another. And then Camellia is saying, I'm just beginning to really, really get it that I am divine. Everything is divine. It brings a depth to my life that is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the most, like I said, for me, it was the most powerful realization that I came across. Um, And for me, I think it happened in such a visceral way that I could not deny it. It was beautiful. I loved it because I could sense that God's love extended way beyond my awareness of me loving God. So it was almost as if God's love was sipped way past into the misty past of my history and still loved me when I was as dead and as blind as a doorbell or a doornail. I had no awareness of God, but even then, there were reminders of how much God's love was always there until I came to a point of consciously engaging with the Creator in my life and then began to walk sort of a conscious path with God's presence in my life. So yeah, thanks, Camellia. It is a phenomenal thing to discover for yourself. And it changes and colors everything. Your experience of human life changes as a result of that. And of course, like we were
Yeah.
talking about, it changes how we intricately and intimately relates to another, in our relationships.
Yeah, there's so much. I think we could talk about this for hours because what's coming up for me is that this addresses people's feelings of loneliness and ideas around like traditional loss, and there's just so much beauty and almost comfort in making a commitment, using Jenny's word, to
Mm-hmm.
this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That you bring into relationship to actually share and almost commune through with your partner. So it's really very beautiful. So unfortunately, our hour is coming to an end. And there are always three questions. I love this. Camellia says, maybe God is knocking at my door. I'm pretty sure that's what's happening there, darling.
Well,
That's great.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
So I like to ask everyone the same three questions at the end, but you've given me cause to sort of shift them around how I ask them. So I'm lead with the question that you've already touched on, but perhaps personally you can expand on it a little bit further. Is what is love, or what does love mean to you?
Well, that's an incredibly difficult question. What is love and what does it mean to me? I think love for me, really, just expressing where I'm at right now, is learning to hold my heart open to what's around me, allowing the flow of divine love, which I know is infinite, is an infinite source of love, to have a portal to be able to come through me into the environment that I'm experiencing. So that's what's love for me right now, is just allowing myself to be present as the presence of the divine in the creation. So whatever it is I'm doing, you know, be a presence of God's love. Allow, just by allowing, not so much by containing, but just by allowing me to be a flow through for God's love to come into our reality.
Love that. Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm.
Now, I also like to ask, and this is a beautiful extension on what you've just shared, is how name three things that you're most grateful for. So gratitude can be an expression of love in the world. So what are three things in your life right now that you are feeling most grateful for?
Well, I express gratitude to Pachamama, Mother Earth. Um, I think that's a place in which this has sort of been my own process of sort of coming to terms with my own consciousness, is how important it is for us to send love to the planet in which we live. And it's not important how that's done, just a sense of doing it, just of trying, or even just attempting it my own way. I do a meditation practice that I think is a very important part of doing that, that I consciously engage with as a process of giving thanks and gratitude to our planet and sending love, holding holding the earth within the breast of my heart, and allowing Mother Earth to feel love, genuine love, that I actually do love the Mother expressed around us, and just give that love and allow the earth to sense that. It's not about scale. It's not about how big the earth is, how small my heart space is. It's not about that at all. My heart space can contain and envelope this whole world. I feel that, and I feel that in my practice. So that's the first place of gratitude. And the second place of gratitude for me is my own body, for allowing me to have an expression and experience of being human, and experiencing the things that are around us, to be able to touch, to sense, to smell, to eat, to work, to age, all of those things, and to deal with the angst of maybe my life coming to an end. That all that experience, I thank my body for allowing me to have that experience. And I don't know how it works, but I know that the experience of my body's service will somehow go with me when it's all over. It's strange, but I sense that. So I do that. I express that gratitude to my own body. And thirdly, but not least, I express gratitude to every person that comes across my path or gives me an expression of love, no matter what it is. And within that circle and context, I give thanks and gratitude to my partner, Jill, because she allows me to experience that on a day to day basis, to be fully loved by another and to be accepted as who I am. It's such a it wasn't always the case. So for me, this is almost a coming around circle, and I'm very grateful that my life has allowed me to experience this with another. Is to be loved and held in space by someone else, and basically be told, "Come as you are," and that's so freeing. It's so freaking awesome. So those are the three circles of my gratitude. I know that that's all I can hold for now, and that's I think that's enough.
I
Yeah.
think that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And then my last question for you tonight, Chris, is right now, in your experience with where you've come from and where you are in this present moment, what do you know for sure?
Wow. We are loved.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. We really are loved.
It's awesome. Thank you for tonight.
Thank you.
We both can. So I'd love to talk reference material for people because we've shared a lot tonight. So are there some books that you would encourage people to? I know your books are wonderful. That's a great place to start for starters.
Yeah.
And anything else for me, just while it's in my head, so it doesn't escape me, is a book that really changed my life with regards to the discussion around surrender. Is Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment. It really actually opened up the dialogue around it and what that actually meant by him sharing his own journey in relationship with surrender and what it meant for him. Mm-hmm. Chris, what other offerings can you suggest? Because I know you're a bookworm.
I love books, and I love books that are well written and writers that love words and just have their way of expressing that. And I try to be one of them. I think the books that I would, or material that I would actually, here are books that I would recommend, I would give somebody else in their life path. Now, not all of them are going to be immediately accessible, but I feel that it's a very small library of books. If I were to get on a journey and pilgrim, those are the books that will be in my backpack. Put it that way. So those are books that have been so incredibly worth it for me, and I would like to genuinely share them with another. And I know that perhaps they won't be immediately accessible to everyone, but that's fine. So the first book would be it's actually a series of books called The Law of One. It's a series of books, The Law of One. I'll leave it at that. I think you can find the title. The second one would be the book by a person called John Peniel. It's called The Lost Teachings of Atlantis. That would be, for me, highly recommended. A third book, which is so beautifully written and incredibly gorgeous to read, is the book by Ken Carey called The Third Millennium. Those, for me, are three books. If I could always duplicate them and find somebody who is hungry and saying they're ready to really get a depth of their own spiritual journey, I would throw those into their backpack. Those are the three books that I feel, if you're really ready, they will take you a long way. You will get there.
Lovely. Thank you for those. So what we'll do, everyone, is we'll share those book references on the event page. We might also plug them for convenience underneath this video, depending on where you were watching it from, whether it was my personal page or Chris's page or my business page or the event page. We're everywhere. Yeah. So Camelia's like, I'm ready, baby. I
All
love it.
right.
So we'll be
Awesome.
sure to share those things. Here, I'll put these comments up. They're so lovely. Ginny is saying thank you. I'm so glad. That's the whole
Yeah.
purpose of these talks, is to be good for your heart. And Camelia is expressing her gratitude as well. So thank you, everyone that watched this evening. If you catch the replay and you have questions, don't be shy. Plug them into the comments below, and either Chris or myself, most likely Chris, will go in and answer those questions for you.
We'll do it together.
Yeah, we'll do it together. And I do share this on YouTube as well. So if you feel so inspired, you can share from there, or you can share from Facebook too. Spread the message. This could be the invitation to someone else to start their own journey and understanding of what their connection to the creator is within themselves and with another. So all meaningful work, and the more we can share, the more we can invite people to that conversation. Chris, thank you so much again for being on with me tonight. It's been a real honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. It's been fantastic.
Okay, thanks everybody. Until next time, next month I'll be speaking with another amazing gentleman. He is going to be sharing his own healing journey and discussing with us how we can potentially begin or deepen our own. So stay tuned for those details. Thanks everyone.
Awesome.
Have a lovely night.
Bye.
Bye.